Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We have a stack of documents on the table today. That is, well, it's heavy.
That's a good word for it.
And I don't just mean physically heavy, though. The sheer volume of legal briefs, the indictments, financial records, historical archives,
Yeah.
it's massive. I mean, the weight of the story itself, it's so dense.
It is heavy. It's a story that, it feels like it has its own gravitational pull. If you get too close to it without a map, you just get sucked into the chaos.
You really do.
Yeah.
And we are, of course, talking about the Murdaugh family.
Right.
And I know a lot of people hearing that name immediately jump to, the Netflix documentaries or the headlines from the murder trial back in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
You think red hair, a low-country drawl, and a really gruesome crime scene.
Yeah, that's the surface level.
But the sources we have today paint a picture that is so much bigger than just a true crime story.
Right. I think if you treat this as just a murder mystery, a did he or didn't he, you completely miss the forest for the trees.
You do.
The mission of this deep dive is to understand the architecture of power. We are not just looking at a man who killed his family. We are looking at a century-long dynasty in the Lowcountry of South Carolina. A legal empire that, it functioned almost like its own city-state for 100 years.
A city-state is a really evocative way to put it, because when you read through the history here, specifically regarding the 14th Judicial District, it doesn't feel like modern American democracy.
Not at all.
It feels feudal. It feels like there was a lord of the manor, and then there was everybody else.
It does. And the question we're trying to answer isn't just about, the forensic evidence of the murders, and we will get there. The deeper question is, how did a system designed to uphold the law get so thoroughly weaponized?
Yeah, how?
How could a single family run a 5-county district as their personal fiefdom? And then, just as importantly, how did it all burn down so spectacularly?
That is the concept of Murdaugh country.
Exactly. So today we're covering the rise, the absolute corruption, the financial crimes that are honestly more complex and maybe even more revealing than the murders.
I think they are.
And where things stand now in January of 2026. Because even though the trial was years ago, the ripples are still moving through the water.
So let's start with the foundation. You can't possibly understand Alex Murdaugh, the man who is currently serving 2 life sentences plus decades more for fraud, without understanding the 3 men named Randolph who came before him.
No, you can't.
This isn't just about a bad apple. It's about the entire tree.
This is the genealogy of influence, and it really starts in 1920. We have to go back over 100 years. Randolph Murdaugh Sr. gets elected as the solicitor for the 14th Judicial District.
Okay, let's pause there for a second, solicitor. For listeners who aren't in South Carolina, that term might sound a little strange, like someone knocking on your door.
Right, trying to sell you something.
Exactly. But it's a specific legal role, right?
Yes, essentially. In most states, you'd call this person the district attorney or the DA. It is the top elected prosecuting attorney for that district.
And the 14th district isn't small.
No, not at all. It's 5 whole counties: Allendale, Colleton, Hampton, Beaufort, and Jasper. It's a massive swath of the Lowcountry, swamps, rural roads, a lot of small towns. And from 1920 all the way to 2006, a Murdaugh held that office.
That is just wild. 86 years.
86 years. 3 generations, one after the other. Randolph Sr., then his son, Randolph Buster Jr., and then his son, Randolph III.
That continuity is staggering. In most democracies, you expect turnover.
Of course.
You have a shift in political winds. A Republican comes in, a Democrat comes in, someone retires, a new person steps up. But here, the prosecutor's office was basically a family heirloom. It was just passed down like a pocket watch.
It was, and that creates a very specific, and I would argue a very dangerous power dynamic. Think about what a solicitor actually does.
They decide who gets charged.
They decide who gets charged with a crime. They decide who gets a plea deal. They decide who goes home to their family and who goes to prison for 20 years. They control the entire docket.
Okay.
Now, combine that absolute control over the criminal side with the other side of the coin, the family law firm.
Right. This is the part that, when I was going through the notes, really stood out. I think it's crucial we unpack it. Randolph Sr. founded a firm, which eventually became known as PMPED.
A mouthful. Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltzroth, and Detrick.
So on one hand, the Murdaughs are state prosecutors putting criminals in jail. But on the other hand, they are private personal injury attorneys suing people. How is that even legal?
Well, it sounds like a massive conflict of interest because, it is one. By any modern standard, it's just baffling. But in this specific rural district, it was the engine of their power.
The engine.
Absolutely. You have the stick of the prosecutor's office, law enforcement answers to you, the criminals are afraid of you, and then you have the carrot of the private firm.
Okay, so how did the carrot part of it work?
Well, as a private attorney, you're winning these massive settlements for local people who get injured in accidents. You make yourself a hero.
Of course.
You hand a check for $100,000 to a farmer who got hit by a truck, and you've just bought that family's loyalty for a generation. Plus, you become incredibly, incredibly wealthy.
So they had the money and they had the law. Both sides of it.
Precisely. And let's talk about the second generation Randolph Buster Murdaugh Jr., because the descriptions of him in the source material are just so vivid.
Yeah.
He took over in 1940 after his father, Randolph Sr., died in a collision with a freight train.
Which is, I mean, that's a tragic, almost cinematic death in itself.
It really is. So Buster steps in, and he served for 46 years. 46. The sources describe a man who was straight out of a Southern Gothic novel.
Oh, yeah?
He loved chewing tobacco. He was known for these wild courtroom theatrics. He would literally act out murders in front of the jury, playing a victim, then playing the killer. He was a performer.
He sounds like a character you'd love to watch in a movie, but maybe not the guy you want holding the keys to the local jail.
Right. Exactly. And he wasn't without controversy. The state Supreme Court actually rebuked him multiple times for making improper arguments. He had this habit of basically scaring juries into convictions.
How so?
In one rape case, he argued that acquitting the defendant would be like releasing a wolf into the community to prey on their daughters. Just pure emotional manipulation.
Classic fear-mongering.
But it worked. He rarely lost a case. However, there's a darker footnote in 1956 that really foreshadows the kind of corruption we see later with Alex.
What happened?
Buster was indicted by a federal grand jury.
The prosecutor himself got indicted. That's a huge twist.
A huge deal. He was accused of warning a bootlegger, a local moonshiner, to move his still into a neighboring county to avoid federal revenue agents who were on their way.
So he was protecting the local criminals, the good old boys, from the feds.
That was the allegation. He was acquitted, of course.
Of course.
But it cemented this idea that the Murdaughs looked out for their own and that federal laws were just suggestions down in Hampton County. It established a boundary line. Inside these 5 counties, the Murdaughs are the law. Outside, the rules might be different, but in here, they run the show.
And that torch then passes to Randolph III, who runs unopposed in every single election until he retires in 2006.
Unopposed. Nobody dared run against him.
So by the time we get to Alex Murdaugh, the 4th generation, that sense of untouchability isn't just an attitude, it's a historical fact. It's in the groundwater.
It's the air he breathed his entire life. Alex grew up watching his father and his grandfather operate with total impunity. And this brings us to the legal machine they built.
The law firm?
The law firm, PMPED. In legal circles, specifically corporate defense circles, Hampton County was known as a judicial hellhole.
That's a term from the American Tort Reform Association, right? It sounds like a place where you just abandon all hope if you're a defendant.
It is not a compliment, no. It means the courts were so biased against corporate defendants that it was nearly impossible to get a fair trial. And the Murdaugh firm mastered a tactic called forum shopping.
Okay, break that down for us. How do you shop for a court?
So there was a state law in South Carolina that allowed you to sue a company in any county where they did business or owned property. It didn't matter if the accident happened 3 counties over.
Right.
If CSX Railroad had a single track running through Hampton, or if a national trucking company had a small depot there, you could sue them in Hampton.
And since the Murdaughs practically own the Hampton courthouse.
Exactly. They would file all their big cases there because they knew the juries were friendly. Remember, the Murdaughs had been solicitors for decades, doing favors for people. Half the jury pool probably owed them a favor or was related to someone they'd helped out of a jam.
And the judges weren't going to move the case.
The judges rarely transferred cases out, so it became an industry.
An industry of suing people.
It did. The firm's headquarters was nicknamed the house that CSX built because of how much money they extracted from the railroad in settlements and verdicts. It got so bad that some businesses wouldn't even set up shop in Hampton County because the liability risk was just too high.
Wow.
The Murdaughs were getting rich by essentially holding the local economy hostage through litigation.
Okay, so that's the empire. Generational wealth, total political control, and a rigged legal game. And into this world steps Richard Alexander Murdaugh, Alex. He's the fourth generation.
He is.
He joins the firm. He volunteers in the solicitor's office. He's living on this massive 1,700-acre estate called Moselle. He's got the boat, the beach house, the status.
Yeah.
But unlike his father or grandfather, the notes suggest he wasn't just working the system, he was rotting it from the inside out.
The rot was deep. And this is where the story shifts. Up until this point, we're talking about systemic issues, nepotism, aggressive litigation, conflicts of interest. But with Alex, it turns into something much darker. Before the financial dam burst in 2021, there were these strange, violent events that started to chip away at the family's sterling reputation. And we have to start with Stephen Smith.
This is the 2015 case. This has been a huge point of contention online and in all the documentaries. Stephen was only 19 years old.
A nursing student, openly gay. He was found dead on a rural road in Hampton County, about 15 miles from the Murdaugh estate. The official ruling at the time was a hit and run.
But the physics of it just didn't make any sense, right? I remember reading that the investigators on the scene were baffled.
None of it made sense. Stephen had this severe blunt force trauma to his head, but there was no glass on the road, no plastic debris from a bumper or a headlight.
Nothing.
If a car hits a person hard enough to kill them, it needs a mess. This scene was clean, and his shoes were still loosely on his feet, which is extremely unusual for a high-speed impact. He would have been knocked out of them.
And immediately, the whispers started.
The name Murdaugh kept coming up in the initial investigation files, specifically Buster Murdaugh, Alex's oldest son.
Okay.
He and Stephen were former classmates. Witnesses mentioned rumors of a relationship, rumors of a cover-up. The sources say the investigation reeked of insider interference. The pathologists initially leaned toward it being a homicide, but then the ruling was changed to a vehicular accident, which effectively shut down the investigation.
Now, we have to be really clear here. Buster has denied this vehemently.
He has, and it's important to state that. He maintains he was at a beach house with his family at the time, and as of where we sit in January 2026, no charges have ever been filed against Buster or anyone else regarding Stephen Smith.
Right.
The case was reclassified as a homicide in 2023, and his body was exhumed for a second autopsy, but it remains this open wound. It was the first sign that maybe the Murdaugh protection racket was starting to slip, or at least that people were starting to talk about things they used to keep quiet.
Then, 3 years later, in 2018, you have the death of Gloria Satterfield. And this one, if you want to understand the moral character of Alex Murdaugh, this is the story you have to look at.
I agree 100%. Gloria was their housekeeper for over 20 years. By all accounts, she was like a second mother to Paul and Buster. She essentially raised those boys.
A part of the family.
A huge part of the family. And in February 2018, she tripped and fell at the Moselle house. The story was she was tripped by the family dogs and suffered a severe head injury. She died of complications a few weeks later.
And normally that's just a tragic accident. People fall. It happens. But the aftermath was so calculated in a way that is just hard to stomach.
It was predatory. First, there was no autopsy performed, which is highly irregular for an unwitnessed fall that results in death.
Yeah.
The coroner was never even notified. And the death certificate listed natural causes, which is just absurd for a traumatic fall. But then Alex goes to Gloria's sons. These are young men. They're grieving their mother. They aren't wealthy. They aren't sophisticated in the legal world. And he says, "I'm going to help you.
I'm on your side."
I'm going to help you sue me so my insurance pays out.
Which sounds generous on the surface. I'll admit fault so you can get paid. It sounds like he's taking care of them.
But it was a trap, a complete setup. He orchestrates the entire lawsuit against himself. He brings in his close friend, Corey Fleming, to represent the sons, and his banker friend, Chad Wessendorf, to handle the money. The insurance company pays out $4.3 million.
$4.3 million. That is life-changing money for Gloria's family.
And they didn't see a dime.
Not a single cent.
Not a penny. Alex, Corey, and Chad diverted all of the funds into accounts that Alex controlled. The sons didn't even know a settlement had been reached until years later when this whole scandal broke and they saw it in the news.
He stole the money meant for the death of the woman who raised his own children.
Every last penny. It shows a complete and total lack of empathy. It shows that he viewed everyone around him, even the people he was supposed to care about, as assets to be liquidated. He was already under financial pressure, and Gloria's tragic death was just an opportunity for him to grab some cash.
But even with that theft, the walls held up. Nobody knew about it. The thing that finally brought the sledgehammer down, the event that made it impossible for anyone to look away, was the boat crash in 2019.
This is the catalyst. February 2019, Paul Murdaugh, Alex's younger son, is driving his father's boat. They're coming back from an oyster roast. He is grossly intoxicated.
How intoxicated?
His blood alcohol was later determined to be 0.286. That is more than 3 times the legal limit. Witnesses said he was belligerent, he was slapping his girlfriend, he was refusing to let anyone else drive the boat.
It's just a recipe for disaster.
And disaster struck. He crashes the boat at high speed into a bridge piling in Archer's Creek. In the chaos, 19-year-old Mallory Beach is ejected from the boat into the dark, freezing water.
And she wasn't found for a week.
Her body wasn't found for 7 days. And this is where the Murdaugh privilege was put on full, horrifying display at the hospital.
That's egregious.
Yeah.
While Mallory is still missing, presumed dead, while the other kids are injured and traumatized and in the emergency room, Alex Murdaugh and his father, Randolph III, show up at the hospital.
And they aren't there comforting the families.
No. They are reportedly going from room to room, trying to talk to the survivors, trying to tell them who was driving the boat, trying to muddy the waters from the very beginning.
He was witness tampering in real time.
Absolutely. And Paul, the driver, he wasn't handcuffed. He wasn't given a sobriety test at the scene. He wasn't booked into jail that night. He was allowed to just walk away with his family. The perception in the community was immediate and furious. The Murdaughs are going to get away with it again.
But the Beach family didn't back down.
No, and thank God for them. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit, and this is the absolute pivot point for the entire saga. Because in a civil lawsuit, you have a process called discovery. The Beach family's lawyers, led by Mark Tinsley, wanted to see Alex's financials. They wanted to prove that he had the means to pay a large judgment, or to prove that he had knowingly let his drunk, underage son use the boat. They wanted to open his books.
And if they open his books,
they would see everything.
Everything. They would see the theft. They would see the millions missing from the law firm, the money stolen from clients like the Satterfields. The entire Ponzi scheme would be exposed to the sunlight.
He's completely cornered.
He was. And a hearing to compel him to show those financial records was scheduled for June 10th, 2021.
And the murders happened on June 7th, 3 days before that hearing.
The timing is probably the most critical piece of evidence in the whole case. The pressure cooker was about to explode. His own law firm was also starting to ask questions about missing fees that very same day. The firm's CFO had walked into his office and said, "Alex, where is this money?"
So take us to that night, June 7th, 2021, the night the Dynasty effectively ended in blood and shotgun shells.
At 10:06 p.m., Alex Murdaugh calls 911. He's hysterical on the phone. He says he just got home and found his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, shot by the dog kennels on their estate, Moselle.
And the scene was brutal.
It was a slaughter. Paul was hit with a shotgun, just brutal, close-range damage. Maggie was shot multiple times with a rifle. It was execution style.
2 different weapons, which I think initially suggested 2 shooters to the public, right? I mean, if you're a hit squad, you might bring 2 different kinds of guns.
That was the theory that the defense tried to push. Or if you were one man trying to stage a scene, you used 2 guns you owned to make it look like a professional hit.
And Alex's alibi for that night.
He claimed he was visiting his mother, who has late-stage dementia, at the time of the shootings. He told law enforcement repeatedly that he was never at the kennels that evening. He said he took a nap, drove to his mom's house, came back, and then found them. But, and this is critical for the trial, that lie didn't hold up.
In the immediate aftermath, though, the heat was off him financially, right? I mean, who sues a man who just lost his wife and son in such a horrific way? Yeah. Who fires a man whose family was just massacred?
Exactly. It worked for a little while. The inquiry into the missing money at the firm stopped out of sympathy. The hearing for the boat crash case was postponed indefinitely. The murders bought him time.
They did.
Not a lot of time, but enough to breathe. He successfully cast himself as the ultimate victim. Look at poor Alex. Everyone is coming after him, and now this tragedy has happened.
But sympathy has a shelf life, especially when you're a lifelong criminal.
Right. By September, the shock had worn off, and his law firm started looking at the books again. And this time, they weren't going to be put off. They found the proof.
And this leads to the infamous roadside suicide attempt. This is where the story goes from tragic to just utterly bizarre. It's the moment where reality starts to feel like a bad TV script.
It really does. It was Labor Day weekend, 2021. On Friday, September 3rd, the partners at PMPED finally confronted Alex. They had found checks written to forge that were fakes. They forced him to resign on the spot.
So the career is over, the legacy is done, the money is gone.
The very next day, Saturday, September 4th, Alex calls 911 again. He claims he's on a rural road, Old Salkehatchie Road, changing a flat tire on his Mercedes. He says a guy in a truck pulled up, rolled down the window, asked if he was having trouble, and then shot him in the head.
But he's alive.
It was a graze wound, superficial. He's airlifted to a hospital, but he was basically fine, and the story fell apart almost instantly.
How so?
Well, his car had run flat tires. They don't go flat like that. There were cameras nearby that didn't show the truck he described. The knife he supposedly used to slash the tire was found. He eventually broke down and admitted he had orchestrated the entire thing.
The whole thing was a lie.
He had hired a man named Curtis Edward Smith to shoot him.
Cousin Eddie?
Yes, his distant cousin and notably his longtime drug dealer.
Why? I mean, why hire someone to shoot you in the head on the side of a road?
Alex claimed he wanted to die so that his surviving son, Buster, could collect on a $10 million life insurance policy. He believed, wrongly by the way, that suicide would void the policy, but murder wouldn't.
Which is a common myth. Usually after a policy has been in effect for 2 years, suicide is covered. As a lawyer, he should have known that.
You'd think so, but Alex was in a desperate, drug-addled state. He thought, if I'm murdered, Buster gets the money and I die a martyr. But he survived. And when that unraveled, the police arrested Cousin Eddie. And when you arrest the drug dealer, that's the loose thread that allows you to pull apart the whole sweater.
Suddenly, everyone was looking at Alex Murdaugh. The financial crimes, the drugs, the boat crash, the housekeeper, and of course the murders. It all just collided.
Let's really look at the financials, because the term embezzlement feels too polite. This was looting. It was predation on the most vulnerable people imaginable.
It was industrial-scale fraud. Alex faced over 100 criminal charges eventually. We're talking about nearly $8.8 million in the state indictments and over $12 million in total when you include the federal charges.
Yeah.
That is a staggering amount of money for a lawyer in a rural county to steal.
And the victims, as you said, weren't just big banks or insurance companies. We mentioned Gloria Satterfield, but then there was Hakeem Pickney.
Tell us about Hakeem's story.
This is the one that just breaks your heart. Hakeem was a deaf man. He was in a horrific car accident in 2009 that left him quadriplegic. He was completely dependent on a ventilator to breathe. Alex represented his family. They won a significant settlement against a tire manufacturer.
And then what happened?
Hakeem tragically died in a care facility in 2011. His ventilator was, and this is the quote, mysteriously unplugged. That's a chilling detail that was never fully resolved criminally. Was it negligence? Was it something more sinister? But the fact remains, Hakeem died, and Alex Murdaugh stole his settlement money.
He stole from a deaf quadriplegic man?
He conspired with Russell Lafitte, who was the CEO of Palmetto State Bank, to serve as a conservator for the family's finances. They essentially treated the Pinkney family's settlement account as their personal piggy bank. An estimated $800,000 to $1 million of the Pinkney family's money just went missing.
That is just... It's evil. There's no other word for it.
There really isn't. And he did it over and over. He stole from Blondell Gray, a woman killed in an ambulance crash. He stole over $112,000 from her family. He stole from Sandra Taylor, a mother whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver. She only saw $30,000 of a $180,000 settlement. He stole from Arthur Badger, a widower. He even stole from his own brother, Randy, and his law partners. No one was off limits.
How did he physically do it? How do you move that much money around without the firm noticing for over a decade?
He used a very clever and, in hindsight, a very simple trick. There is a legitimate settlement planning company called Forge Consulting that lawyers use all the time to structure payouts for clients. It's a well-known, reputable company based in Atlanta. Alex went to Bank of America and opened a personal bank account under the name Forge. Just Forge.
So when he told a colleague or a client, write the check out to Forge, they thought it was going to the legitimate consulting company.
Exactly. It looked right on the check. But instead of going to the Atlanta-based firm, it was being deposited directly into Alex's personal slush fund at the local branch.
And Bank of America just let him do this. Forge isn't a person's name. It's a DBA, a doing business as.
They were sued later for their complete lack of due diligence. It was a massive failure of banking compliance, but it worked for years and years.
And where did all the money go? $12 million is a lot of cash. You can buy a lot of houses with that, but he already had the houses.
A huge chunk of it went to opioids. Alex had a massive, raging addiction to oxycodone. We're talking about spending incredible sums, tens of thousands of dollars a month on pills.
Oh.
And that brings us back to Curtis Edward Smith, Cousin Eddie. They were eventually indicted together for a money laundering scheme involving $2.4 million to purchase and distribute narcotics over an 8-year period.
So he's a drug kingpin, a thief, a fraudster, and a murderer. Which brings us to the trial. The reckoning.
The trial in early 2023 was a national spectacle. It was televised, it was dissected on social media, everyone had an opinion. It was the trial of the century for South Carolina.
And Alex pleaded not guilty to the murders. He took the stand, which was an incredibly risky move.
It's the Hail Mary of defense tactics. You really only put the defendant on the stand if you think you're losing badly. Alex is a lawyer. He thought he could talk his way out of it.
He thought he could sell it.
He thought he could. He admitted to all the financial crimes on the stand. He cried. He admitted to lying about the roadside shooting. But he swore up and down that he did not kill Maggie and Paul.
But the technology caught him in the lie.
The kennel video. This was the undeniable smoking gun. Paul had taken a video of a friend's dog's tail on his phone at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before the murders are believed to have happened. And in the background of that video, you can clearly hear three voices.
Paul, Maggie,
and Alex.
And Alex had told the police repeatedly on tape that he was never down at the kennels that night.
The video proved he was lying. It put him at the scene of the crime with the victims minutes before the shots were fired. Once the jury heard that, his credibility was completely destroyed. He tried to pivot on the stand, saying his pill addiction made him paranoid, so he lied to the police, but the jury just didn't buy it.
No. On March 2, 2023, after less than 3 hours of deliberation, which is incredibly fast for a case this complex, they found him guilty.
Convicted of murdering his wife and his son, sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole.
And that really seemed like the end of it. Case closed. But here we are in January 2026, and the story isn't quite over, is it?
It never really ends with this case. Alex is currently appealing the murder conviction. And his defense team is claiming there was serious jury tampering involved.
This is the accusation against the clerk of court.
Yes, Becky Hill, the Colleton County clerk of court. The defense alleges that she inappropriately influenced the jury to secure a conviction because she wanted to write a book about the trial and become famous.
That's a huge allegation.
It's massive. They claim she told jurors not to trust the defense's evidence, that she had private conversations with the jury foreperson. If true, it completely undermines the integrity of the verdict.
So what's the status of that?
That appeal is currently under review by the South Carolina State Supreme Court. As of right now, January 2026, we are waiting to see if they grant him a new trial. The bar for overturning a jury verdict is incredibly high, but the allegations are specific and very damaging.
And what about all the financial crimes? Those seem much more cut and dry.
He pleaded guilty to those eventually. He's serving 27 years on the state charges and 40 years on the federal charges. And those are all running concurrently with the life sentences.
So he's never getting out?
Never. And there was a twist there, too. He initially had a plea deal with the feds. It would have been a lighter sentence.
Yeah.
The deal required him to be 100% truthful about all his crimes and where the money was. The feds hooked him up to a polygraph and asked him about hidden assets and if there were other crimes they didn't know about. He failed it.
He failed the polygraph. You can't make this stuff up.
He just couldn't stop lying, even when it was in his best interest to tell the truth. So the feds said, you breached the be truthful clause, and they hammered him with the harsher 40-year sentence.
So what about the other players, the enablers? Because Alex didn't do all of this alone.
No, and that's a really important part of the story. The system that they used to prop Alex up has been dismantled. Russell Laffitte, the bank CEO who helped steal the Pinckney money, got 7 years in federal prison. Corey Fleming, the lawyer friend who helped with the Satterfield scheme, he got nearly 14 years.
So the Knights of the Round Table are all in dungeons.
Yeah.
What about the castle? What happened to Moselle?
It's gone. The Moselle estate was sold off. It was rebranded as Cross Swamp Farm. They were clearly trying to wash away the name. The house itself, this grand hunting lodge, was resold for about $1 million, which was well below market value, to a guy who specializes in restoring stigmatized properties. He gutted it, the kennels where the bodies were found. It's all just land now. The physical empire has been erased.
And Buster, the sole surviving son. He's lost his mother, his brother, and his father is in prison for life.
It's an unbelievable tragedy for him. He's trying to salvage what he can. He settled the boat crash lawsuit with the Beach family, but he's on the offensive now. In June of 2024, he sued Netflix and Warner Bros. For defamation, specifically regarding the documentaries that linked him to Stephen Smith's death. He's fighting hard to clear his name, but the shadow of his father is just enormous. It's hard to be a Murdaugh in South Carolina right now.
It really is the end of the dynasty. The law firm changed its name. It's the Parker Law Group now. They scrubbed Murdaugh off the letterhead almost immediately. The solicitor's office is no longer run by a Murdaugh for the first time in a century.
It's the total collapse of 100 years of accumulated power. And I think that's the mission we talked about at the beginning. We set out to understand how this happened. And I think the answer is that absolute power in a small, isolated district created a sense of total immunity.
It's the Murdaugh country mindset.
Yeah.
If you are the law, you don't fear the law.
Until you push it too far. Prosecutors argued that the murders were a desperate, twisted act of misdirection. Alex knew the financial crimes were about to be exposed. He thought that if his wife and son were brutally murdered, the pity would stop the inquiries, the auditors at his firm would back off, the lawsuit would be paused.
He sacrificed his own family to save his reputation, or just to buy a few more days.
To buy time, to keep the house of cards standing for just a little bit longer. It's a level of narcissism that is just hard to fathom. He looked at Maggie and Paul and decided they were expendable if it meant he didn't have to face the music on Monday morning.
It really is terrifying. You know, we've covered the legal records, the timeline, the money, but there's one thing that just sticks with me through all of this. It's the victims. Not just Maggie and Paul, but all the people who trusted him.
That's the core tragedy, isn't it? A lawyer is supposed to be your advocate, especially in a small town. You go to them when your life has fallen apart, when you're injured, when you're grieving a loved one. Alex Murdaugh looked those people in the eye, people who were desperate for help, people at their most vulnerable, and he didn't see clients. He saw piggy banks. He saw a way to fund his opioid addiction and his lavish lifestyle. That betrayal of trust is just as violent in its own way as the physical crimes he committed.
It really changes how you look at the justice system, especially in these small dynastic districts.
It forced South Carolina to take a long, hard look in the mirror. The Murdaugh case exposed these deep systemic flaws in how justice was administered in the Lowcountry. It showed that all the checks and balances we think are in place failed for decades because of one family's name. It showed that if you know the judge and you know the banker, you can get away with almost anything for a while.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, where does that leave us?
Yeah.
The king is in prison, the castle has been sold, the knights, the bankers, and the law partners are convicted.
The dynasty is over. But it leaves a vacuum. And it leaves a lot of questions.
Questions like what?
Well, think about it. Alex Murdaugh didn't operate in a complete vacuum. He had a banker, he had a lawyer partner, he had his drug connection. But were they the only ones?
That is the big question, isn't it?
We're talking about a system that ran for 100 years. You don't move millions of dollars, launder drug money, and potentially fix juries if the old rumors about Buster Jr. and Randolph III have any truth to them, with just 3 or 4 people.
You think there are more people out there who knew?
I think it's highly probable. There are likely other enablers still in Murdaugh country who are still in positions of power. People who look the other way. People who signed the papers without asking the right questions. People who attended the parties.
The parties.
We know about the rampant drug use. We know about the Lindsay Edwards allegations. These are disturbing accusations from a sex worker regarding violent sexual assault at high society parties attended by Alex, allegedly protected by a local madam. Those weren't just parties for Alex. Who else was in that room? Who else is worried that Alex might start talking again if his appeal fails and he has nothing left to lose?
And what secrets are still buried in that swamp?
Exactly. The head of the snake was cut off, but the swamp is deep and it is dark. And swamps are very, very good at hiding things.
On that note, I think we'll leave you to ponder that. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Murdaugh dynasty. It's a story of power, corruption, and the ultimate cost of thinking you are above the law.
Stay curious, everyone, and question everything.
We'll see you next time.